A symphony orchestra, a huge choir, a children's choir, a chamber orchestra alongside the symphony orchestra, 3 soloists, a baritone, a tenor, a soprano, all in all, nearly 300 people performing. What moves a composer to make an epic statement like this? My subject is war and the pity of war. The poetry is in the pity. Those are the words of the 25-year-old soldier Wilfred Owen, who died at the front just a week before the end of the First World War. 22 years later, the German Air Force dropped 500 tons of bombs on the city of Coventry in one night, devastating the city centre and destroying the ancient cathedral that had been at the heart of the city's life for so many generations. Another couple of decades later, the city had been rebuilt. There was a new cathedral standing alongside the ruins of the old, and they wanted to consecrate this new building with an act of remembrance. They wanted music, and so they approached the perhaps leading composer of the day in the United Kingdom, Benjamin Britten. Benjamin Britten was a controversial choice. He'd been a pacifist. He'd been a conscientious objector. He was also a gay man at a time when, extraordinarily, homosexuality was still criminal in the United Kingdom. He was a man for whom it was very difficult to write a piece about war. But he was given carte blanche, so how did he approach it? What did he do? Well, he put together these enormous forces. We have a symphony orchestra, we have a large choir, we have the children's choir, we have soloists, and we have a chamber orchestra. Why did he do that? Well, for him, he wanted to get to the core of the inherent conflict, the tension at the center of war. Also for him personally, he chose the Latin text of Requiem that had been heard in churches for centuries, but then the words of Wilfred Owen as a commentary juxtaposed. So you have the conflict of the ancient, the brutal, the powerful, the machinery of war, and then the voice of the individual. But it wasn't just in his choice of texts and the choice of performers that he demonstrated this conflict that was inherent for him in it. It was also in his musical language. Those are the opening notes of Britten's War Requiem. As a pacifist, he was, of course, deeply conflicted about the idea of war. How did he express that conflict through his music? Well, in the opening notes of the piece, you already hear some of the key ideas. Hidden inside that chord is this interval. It's called the tritone, or augmented fourth, and in the history of Western music, it's been called many things, including the devil in music, but it represents all that is unstable and conflicted within music. The first notes that the choir sings outline this interval. They sing an F sharp and a C natural. In fact, that interval is repeated constantly throughout the entire piece. At the end of the first movement, the introitus, where the text is asking for eternal rest for the souls of the fallen, he resolves to this chord, a pure major chord, which is also embedded in the very opening of the piece. If you listen to these notes, it's just a fleeting mention of that resolution, but it's still there. So he has conflict and resolution, challenge, if you will, in the DNA of the music, but also in the texts. That opening introitus talks about looking for eternal rest for the souls. But then he challenges that with the first piece of poetry by Wilfred Owen. Wilfred Owen's first line is, "What passing bells for these who die as cattle," saying that these tolling bells at the beginning of the introitus are for nothing. The reality of war is that these men died like cattle. The War Requiem is intended as an act of reconciliation. At the premiere, there was a Russian soprano, a German baritone, a British tenor. Combatants from various sides were represented. This was important to Benjamin Britten, and in this spirit, I'm delighted that the National Youth Orchestra of Germany will be sitting side by side with our National Arts Centre Orchestra in our performance on November 9th, just a few feet away from the cenotaph. It's going to be a memorable evening where we look to the past and remember, and look to the future in reconciliation.